Hey, this is Elizabeth Potts-Weinstein, and today I'm going to explain fair use in copyright law. So, copyright law covers any artistic, creative work that has been memorialized in a tangible format. Tangible formats include electronic formats as well as actual physical pieces of paper and things. Copyright law typically applies to things that you create that could be very artistic works, like a sculpture, like a photograph, like a painting, like a fiction book, but it also applies to businessy kinds of things like articles or nonfiction books. Anytime you create anything that has a creative aspect to it, it automatically has copyright protection here in the United States. You can also register a copyright, and we'll talk about that in another video. But let's say you want to use something that has a copyright attached to it. So how can you do that without actually paying for a license? You might be able to under the doctrine of fair use, but you have to be really careful that you actually meet the various factors in your willing to take the risk that you might be wrong. So the first factor is the purpose and character of the use. How are you using this copyrighted work? Is it a commercial use where you're making money somehow? Or is it a nonprofit educational use? I'm not just talking about whether you're charging money for selling that thing, because that's obviously commercial use. It could be that there's any kind of commercial aspect. So, for example, if you use it in your YouTube video and you have ads, that's definitely commercial. It could also just be something related to this use. So let's say you have a YouTube channel that you don't monetize, but below you have links to affiliate links, you have links to your website where people can buy your products or services. That can all be commercial use. Another aspect of the character of your use is whether or not your use is transformative. So what that means is you're not just taking a clip from something or taking a photo and using it just in exactly how it was designed, but you're transforming that into a different creative work. Sometimes that can be fair use, but it depends on how transformative it is. This is where you're taking a bit of a risk if you're using something without permission, because it needs to be transformative enough to be fair use. The second factor is the nature of the work itself, the copyrighted work. Is it a work that is highly creative, or is it a work that's kind of factual? So what we're talking about here is you could have a creative work that's a painting, okay? That is very artistic, very creative. But you could also have a creative work that's an article that has a table in it that has a bunch of data. That may have some copyrights attached to that. It was created by somebody and put into a tangible format. And so courts will be more particular about the artistic works versus the factual information parts of the work. The third factor is the amount and substantiality of the portion used. So this can be a real danger if the work is something where you can't really use just a piece of it. So let me give you an example. If you use a book and you just take a little quote out of that book, that's a very small amount of the overall entire work. Versus if you use someone's photograph, well, that's the entire work. You're using the whole entire thing. Obviously, very different. There is an issue of the substantiality of the work. So let's say someone wrote an article or a book and you're using just a very small amount of it. You might think that you're okay under this factor. But if it's the most important, most vital part of that communication, of that creative work, you still might be in trouble. The fourth factor is the effect of your use on sales of the original work. So for example, if you take this book and you just reproduce the entire book and you sell it, well, you're making it so people don't want to buy that book. On the flip side, if you take out a couple quotes from the book, you're doing a review of the book, then a court might say, well, it's actually going to help that book's sales. Maybe even link to it, right? And someone can buy it from Amazon. It's contributing to that book making more money, so it's very different. One important aspect of fair use is to understand that these 4 factors, they're not like a checklist. We have to check off all 4 of them. The courts look at this on a case-by-case basis, and they weigh the different factors. The commercial versus nonprofit is probably the most important one, but all of them are somewhat important. Most of the time when you're doing something that is fair use, you're going to have more or less of some of these factors. It's not like you're going to have 0 on all of them. So that's one of the risks of fair use, is it's very difficult to know for sure if you qualify. So there are 2 examples of things that are usually fair use. One is a review or criticism or comment on the work, a book review, for example. You can also have something where you might reproduce the entire work, but you're criticizing it. So you have a photograph that you're not using it just in your news article about the thing that happened, but you're actually talking about the photograph itself. The photograph is the news. And in that case, it might be that using it makes sense under fair use. The other traditional fair use is a parody. So you take some clip, you take some photo, you take some article, and you make a parody, humorous version of it that's actually commenting in a lot of ways on that work itself. There's a couple aspects you need to be aware of. One of them is that this law of fair use applies differently in different locations. So I'm talking about fair use in the United States. How it works in the EU, for example, is very different. The second is, just because you qualify under these fair use factors, just because you're creating a parody, just because you're writing a review, doesn't mean that the person who owns the copyright is going to come after you. They may send you a cease and desist letter, they may file a lawsuit, and you have to go through the expense of making your argument. You may win in the end, but you still got to pay a lawyer a bunch of fees to win. Again, this is Elizabeth Potts-Weinstein. If you have any questions about fair use or any comments, please go ahead and put them in the comments below. If you found this video helpful, I'd love for you to hit that like button and of course subscribe to this channel for more helpful legal tips. Thanks a lot, you guys. Bye-bye.